When life gives you lemons, make lemonade. When life gives you the yips, well, that's what we're going to figure out today. This is Neil Wattier with the Amped Mental Performance Podcast, talking about the gremlins of sport performance. Today, I'm talking to Adam Law, mental skills coach for the Brigham Young University baseball team and former mental performance coach for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Adam specializes in helping athletes and coaches perform at their best when their performance matters most. During a 7-year career as a professional baseball player, Adam was drawn to sports psychology after observing how he, his teammates, and opponents would knowingly and unknowingly use various mental skills to gain a performance advantage. He was periodically challenged by the throwing yips and wanted to discover lasting strategies to enhance confidence in his throw. He also struggled with performance anxiety stemming from the pressure of being a third-generation professional baseball player. Adam, great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for showing up, dude.
For sure, Neil. I'm happy to be here. Happy to chop it up.
Right on, man. And so recent transition, we were just talking about that. You were with the Dodgers here in Phoenix, Arizona, recently transferred up to BYU, working with baseball team. How's it been going so far?
So far, so good. I'm originally from Utah, so it's really good to be closer to home and family, something that my wife and I have missed over the past, well, that I've missed over the past 10 years and that my wife and I have missed over the past 4 years. So we value our relationships with family and friends and thought that this would be a great move when the opportunity came up. It's good to be in the college game. It's something new for me. It's a new challenge. And yeah, just really grateful and fortunate for the opportunity to be at BYU.
So did you play baseball at BYU?
I did. Yeah, I
Okay.
played baseball here prior to the MLB draft.
Awesome, man. And so, and I've got to put this out there, and I don't think I told you this. So Adam was one of my mentors as I was. So I completed my degree, and for most people that are doing mental performance coaching, you finish your master's degree, you go through this massive 400-hour mentorship training thing where you donate your time and you work with an organization, you work with athletes, and then you have a mentor that's signing off and saying, yep, doing what they're supposed to be doing, mentoring, teaching, educating. And so Adam and I actually went to school together. We were both in a national university. We were classmates. And then he went off and he did his thing. And then I went off and I did my thing. And I was still in the Air Force. So a lot of my hours were sometimes hard to come by. And so when I was finishing up my mentorship, I actually called. I remember emailing you, and I'm like, he's not gonna like this. So number one, the question is, well, what took you so long to get all your hours? And then the next thing was, and I knew it was coming. You're like, are you sure you want me to be your mentor? I'm like, so much younger than you. And I was just talking to some of my students at Grand Canyon University the other day, and I'm like, you know what, mentorship looks like a lot of things. And my instant reaction was why wouldn't I want you to be my mentor? I don't care how young you are. Look at the experience you have: college baseball, pro baseball, mental performance coach for a major league baseball. Now you're doing mental performance for a D1 college. Like, come on, man. Like, put your ego aside and learn from the people that are doing what you want to do. And so I thought it was really cool that we connected in school and then we reconnected where you were able to be my mentor.
For sure. And I think like it goes both ways. Like initially it was like, I don't know about this, man. I've worked with like younger graduate students as their mentor. And then when you reached out, I'm like, I could learn so much more from this guy. So I'm actually happy that it worked out because getting not only our in-person conversations, but learning from your direct client contact hours and the videos, the content that you shared helped me become a better practitioner as well as I kind of had to chew through your approach and my approach and like it made me a better practitioner. So I'm super grateful that you pulled the trigger and went for it.
That's awesome, man. And it's, I'm kind of bummed that you moved, but I get it. It was cool having you here in the local area, but that's the one thing that I always loved about sports, of course. But in the military, especially, I know people all over the world. And so, for somebody to move away, it's almost like, oh, okay, cool. That's just one more place I'm going to go visit. So
Sure.
it's actually kind of cool. So I wanted to start the conversation with, we talked about the yips. What is it? And from a mental performance coach, but then also the frustration of when an athlete experiences it. So give us a quick explanation of what is it, and then how do you deal with it?
Yeah. So I think there's various causes of the yips and various definitions of it. Sometimes it's a neurological thing, sometimes it's a psychological thing. I didn't go so much down the road of neurological. My studies and experience were more psychological. And it's basically losing the ability to control fine motor skills when the pressure's on or when the lights come on is what my experience was as a player. And then I learned about it in graduate school, and it's like, okay, I can see how the pressure's mounting up, kind of um, like barricaded me from being able to do what normally is a fairly common ability, which is throwing the baseball. So simple terms, as an infielder, I no longer was able to throw the ball consistently across the diamond to the first baseman because of a psychological distress when the lights turned on. We see it in gymnastics with the twisties. Gymnasts get up in the air and lose a sense of where they're at, and they're for a stunt or a trick that they've been able to do many times, and they just aren't able to do it. It's such a weird thing that some people, and myself included, don't really know where it stems from. We try to attack it from different angles, but yeah, that's how I would define it: is the inability to deliver a regularly practiced motor skill, but when the lights turn on and the pressure's on.
So how do you, looking back on, you're like, okay, that makes sense, because you have the education, you have the experience, you've been able to apply, maybe sometimes not as good as others. That's one of the things where like we kind of figure out how we're going to approach certain things. And we look back and we're like, okay, that didn't work out as good as I thought it was, as a coach, as a practitioner. But how do you look back on what you experienced and help people with that now? Because it's got to be frustrating. Like you said, just something so simple like throwing a ball from third to first or from catcher to pitcher or something like that, and suddenly you just can't, you don't have the accuracy, you don't have the power, you don't have whatever it is, and your coach, everybody's watching you, and you're like, what am I supposed to do about this? How do you help people work through that without sports? Is what have you done for me lately, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're not performing, you're gone,
Right.
right? And so that's got to increase the stress and pressure. How do you help people work through that?
Yeah, I think two pieces have really helped me as a practitioner deliver skills or techniques to individuals who struggle with the yips. And first is an attitude of acceptance. The more you reject or push away the possibility that you might throw a ball 30 feet over the target's head or 10 feet straight in front of you, if you reject and push that away, the more likely it is to happen. And if somebody who's challenged by the yips can accept the fact that, hey, you know what? There's a pretty good chance that I might airmail a throw or throw it wide or throw it straight into the ground. It relieves some pressure of having to be so perfect over and over and over again. So first is the attitude of acceptance. Once an individual can accept that it might happen, we see that oftentimes a lot of throws become a lot more accurate because the pressure is lessened. The second thing is the difference between implicit and explicit learning, or implicit and explicit skill acquisition. Most of the time, we are taught certain skills implicitly, where somebody teaches us and tells us what we need to do with our bodies, that then when the lights turn on, instead of just reacting and playing, I'm now thinking about, wait, is my hand picking up the baseball and going to my ear? And am I following through? And the regularly trained skill of throwing now becomes super cognitive, and I'm thinking about it. What am I doing? On the flip side, we try to get our athletes who are challenged by the yips to get explicit, or to focus more on things outside of their bodies, a target. Some pitchers have found success who have been challenged by the yips of breathing towards their target and throwing the ball in that same line of their breath. So first is the attitude of acceptance, and then getting external with the goal or with the skill, as opposed to staying internal and implicit.
I was having a conversation with one of the students at GCU the other day, and I had made the comment, "You can't talk your way through excellent performance." And we talked about it for a little while because she's a swimmer, she's a competitive Division I swimmer, and she's like, I don't think I necessarily agree with that. So and I love comments like that. I
Sure.
love when people, I'm like, okay, let's do this, And so we start talking through it, and I'm like, well, tell me some like a mistake that you might make. And she talked about a certain swim stroke. And I'm like, okay, so when you realize that you're getting fatigued and your technique is failing, what do you do? She's like, well, I talk to myself. And I'm like, okay, we agree up to this point. The difference is, what are you saying to yourself and for how long? Because I know what she was getting at. We just were using different language. She was interpreting what I meant was, you can't, like, if I'm gonna do a golf backswing, I can't talk to myself about this grip and this
Right.
arm and like step by step instructions on how to hit a golf ball. You can't do it. And that's what you're talking about, overthinking. You're talking about over processing basic information, like pick up your foot, like you ever try to
Sure.
talk your way through to walking. It's obnoxious. But what she actually was getting at was performance cues. So you simplify, because overthinking makes you're not able to trust. You were talking about the natural ability to do a very simple task. When you overthink, now your body is almost breaking it down, and it's ruining the movement. And so it was an interesting conversation that we got into. And she's like, okay, now I know what you mean. Yes, I can use performance cues, but I can't talk my way through excellent performance. And so that's where my mind went when, as soon as you said overthinking, was, yeah, when your brain gets going, you're ruining natural movement.
Absolutely. And I think oftentimes when we see the yips start to emerge in performance, athletes are taking what they are practicing in kind of a training environment. They're taking those same cues, the cognitive, the deliberate, the conscious, into their performance, into the performance environment. I like to call it a training mindset versus a trusting mindset. There's a time to train all of the skills, all the movement patterns away from the competition. But now, come game time, there's a time to trust all of that training. And like you said, I can't think of a better way to simplify and have one or two performance cues, 3 words or less, that can then allow those movement patterns to emerge when the pressure's on. So as opposed to thinking, hey, I need to touch the ball on four seams this way and touch it with my fingertips or whatever. Hey, throw the ball through the target or through the target can then kind of encompass all that I've trained to now allow me to trust what that training has done for me.
So let's talk through that a little bit more. So you have somebody that, and we've seen people, and we both have probably done it before, and no, I have. When we talk about overthinking, that could be ruminating on a past mistake. That's another big thing that people have is, I don't want to make that mistake again. And so all they're thinking about is, I don't want to make this mistake. And that's almost a cardinal rule in mental performance. The more you think about something, the more likely you are to do it, or the more likely you are to do something equally as bad, because you're trying so hard. It's like the pitcher. You're like, if you walk out to a pitcher's mound and the coach says, hey, this guy's going to crush this ball if you throw it high and outside, don't throw it high and outside. Instead, do everything that you said after that is irrelevant, because all he hears is high and outside. And he's either
Sure.
still going to throw it high and outside, or he's going to do something equally bad because he's trying so hard not to do that one thing. And so I always lean to, what does right look like? So you have that mental imagery of, just focus on what you're trying to do. Like you talked about exhaling and throwing the ball through that line of breath. Like, that's mental imagery, and that's super powerful. But let's get into like some of the, I think the thing that we're really leaning towards here is that idea of overthinking. Give us a little bit more detail of what that means to you through your experience and through your coaching, and then also, how do you help people with it?
Yeah, for sure. I think oftentimes, just to put into perspective here, when overthinking occurs, from my experience as a practitioner, people are usually focused on not doing something because they've had a bad experience in the past, or they're worried about what's going to happen in the future. Oftentimes, overthinking is not occurring in the present. And so, uh, to kind of to circle that in, it's like, okay, how can we get this individual to be more present and focus on what he needs to do in this moment, regardless of what's happened in the past or what could happen in the future? And for a lot of us, the go-to is the breath. The breath is always happening in the present. And if an individual can focus on their breath, then they're focused on the present, and it's able to slow the mind down from thinking about what might happen or what has happened. So that's usually where I'll go, whether it's the breath, engaging the senses, a focal point in baseball. Every stadium that we play in, the dimensions may be different, but every stadium is going to have a left field and a right field foul pole. Every stadium is going to have a home plate. And so coming up with a focal point, a visual cue that our players can use that will bring them in the present is another way. So we have the breath, we have the present. Some people use a release. So everywhere we play is going to have either grass, dirt, turf, something that they can scoop up with their hand, squeeze it, feel what it's like to squeeze their hand, which is happening in the present, and then go ahead and throw out whatever they squoze in order to engage again in the present moment. So despite getting pelted with thoughts of the future, thoughts of the past, okay, cool. Let's redirect our attention to the present moment, and that's what we'll do through focal points and the breath.
That's great stuff. And I've seen a lot of people. I was watching what was it, the Hard Knocks with the one with the Jets, and Aaron Rodgers did that all the time. He would pick up the grass, and sometimes it was about throwing it to see where the wind is blowing, right? Something simple like
Sure.
that, instructional type stuff. But he actually talked about it was his way to connect with, and he didn't really use the words, but I think he was actually referring to, like you said, he was trying to connect in the present moment. He was trying to connect with the ground. He was trying to connect with, and it all sound very flowery, like connect with the earth and the aura and all these, like, that's not what he's, that wasn't the words he was using. But so from a certain perspective, people may like, oh, that's really weird. But for like you and I, the idea is grounded. It's you're grounding yourself in the current moment. And I know mindfulness is a fancy word that's kind of blown out of proportion and suddenly losing a lot of its focus. And a lot of people I know in our career field are using more of a present moment focus type approach, which actually is better than mindfulness, because it really does tell you exactly what you're trying to do. Present moment focus, because behavior, actions happen in the present. Whatever happened 5 minutes ago, 5 seconds ago is irrelevant. I was working with a football player who, as a wide receiver, he was having a hard time. How does he recover after an easy dropped pass? And I'm like, well, you got to break the game down into 10-second segments. So after you drop the pass, you have 10 seconds before you're back in the huddle having a conversation. So that means you got 10 seconds to get your mind right so that you can focus on the moment. The moment is what's the play, and then to the line, right? And so it was a way to help him break it down and say, you know what, it's okay to be upset. Give yourself 5 seconds and be frustrated. And then you got to let it go. Present moment focus. This is what I'm doing right now. And so a lot of these things we're talking about is trying not to overcomplicate. Actually, one of the things I tell people, I tell people that in sports psychology and mental performance coaching, we have a lot of bumper sticker statements, and and we
Right.
really do. We have a lot of sayings that have a lot of meaning behind them, and one of them that I like to use is, when life is chaotic, you have to simplify. And so ruminating that's exactly what it is. Your brain is complicating everything, and it's not allowing yourself to focus. It's just ruminating on something, or it's worrying about the future. And so, like, when life is chaotic, how can you simplify? And whether it be breathing techniques, that's a great point. Breathing happens in the present. That's an amazing bumper sticker statement, right? So breathing happens in the present. I can feel the dirt of the grass in my hands. That pulls me back to the present moment. So whatever it is that you need for some kind of performance cue, or you mentioned focal point visual cues, are really, really good to pull yourself back into the moment, to let everything else go. And it certainly is, it's simple, but don't confuse simple with easy. So
Mhm.
how do you help people simplify to get them to be able to practice this, but then also be able to implement it in the moment?
Right. I think one of who we would claim to be one of the godfathers of sports psychology in recent years is Ken Ravizza. And he always said that the game begins before it begins. And so coming up with, okay, what am I going to do as a pre-performance routine, or what am I going to do as an in-game performance routine, and defining and practicing what I'm actually going to do to ground myself or to bring myself into the present before the competition happens. And so when you are in a normal team practice, or you can go out to your performance setting on your own and go through, hey, what am I going to do when the game speeds up on me? Am I going to my breath, or am I going to a different focal point? What is the stadium, the arena? What does that look like? And getting in those repetitions. So then when it actually happens in the game, it makes it a lot easier to then incorporate and apply. So defining and then practicing before it actually happens is probably the go-to, which then adds a level of comfort when crap does hit the fan, and it makes it a lot easier to then bounce back from forward thinking, past thinking, and grounding yourself in the present moment because you've already practiced that.
Yeah, and that's probably the most difficult thing that I've discovered about our job is to help people understand you're not going to be able to do this in the moment if you don't practice ahead of time.
Sure.
People get that with physical skills. You have to go to the gym, you have to do weightlifting, you have to run, like all these different things, like you have these general physical skills, and everybody's like, oh yeah, if I want to be flexible, I have to stretch, right? And well, if you want to have good mental skills, you have to learn and do the mental skills before you need the mental skills. And so that's something that's been relatively frustrating, but also very enjoyable when you see people have that moment of, okay, now I know what you're talking about. And then they get down to business and you start seeing some amazing progress on some of the simplest stuff. And that's the beauty of our job is people want giant solutions to giant problems, but that's
Right.
not how it works. The little things done consistently over a long period of time have the greatest impact. And so I wanted to give you a chance to address, I know a lot of sports have them, especially in baseball. How do you get people to overcome superstitions and to move towards habits and routines of excellence, not superstitions?
Right. So I think first, kind of defining what a routine is, and then going through with the individual or the team, what are their routines, and are they actually helping them? So I like to define a routine as something that provides a sense of control and a sense of normalcy. Something that when it's a chaotic environment, fans are screaming and yelling at you, the game's speeding up, do you have a routine or something that you can go back to that provides a sense of control and a sense of normalcy? In baseball, especially, superstition creeps in because of the amount of games that we play. We play pretty much every day. And if you have a good game, 4 hits, it's really easy to then wear the same socks, eat the same food, do the exact same thing over and over and over again. While, sure, it may provide a sense of normalcy and a sense of control over the moment, but it's not serving you. The question that I'll ask the players is, are you able to still perform well when you're not able to go through the eating the same thing, wearing the same socks or whatever? So it's kind of poking holes in those behaviors and those patterns of thinking of, let's actually really think about this. You're telling me that you can't perform well when you don't eat the same food over and over and over again. Obviously, it's a simple question, and the players start to think, okay, yeah, you're right. That's actually not a routine. That's more so a superstition that isn't serving me. And so we want to build some flexibility in their routines while also maintaining their purpose of providing a sense of control and normalcy. So that's kind of how I shoot it. Is I ask questions to hopefully help them poke holes in their own thinking, and kind of I can lead them down the path where it's like, okay, how can I tighten up my routine where there's some flexibility built in?
Yeah, that's important because especially when you travel so much, and before, I'm sure you mentioned there's a drastic difference between the college game and the pro game. Whereas, pro, it's a lot of things are outside of your hand. Like there's people that handle the recruiting, there's people that handle the contracts, there's people that handle this and this and this. And suddenly you're in the college game and you're recruiting and you're judging and you're trying to find who's going to be the good fit. And like you're doing all these things that you didn't have to do before. And so how does that work for you then? Because we as practitioners, and you and I are not like the licensed type, but there are people out there that do clinical counseling that also do performance, right? Doctors of psychology or licensed counselors or even social workers. But you and I aren't licensed, but we still are that psychology-based practitioner approach. And sometimes in our experience, we care more about other people and we're not always taking care of ourselves. So what are some of the things that you've run into that, even though you're the expert on your team, how do you keep yourself focused and grounded and take care of yourself amongst all the
Yeah,
craziness?
good question. And I think like I need to practice what I preach. And one of the go-to in an initial setting, in an initial session with a player, the first question that I'll ask is, how are your physio fundamentals? And what I mean by that is, are you eating well? Are you sleeping well? Are you working out? Are you getting physical exercise? And are you hydrated? And if one of those are off, then work with a mental performance coach really doesn't mean much until you can get the physical body feeling comfortable. And so that's really where I start from a personal level is, hey, I need to eat well, I need to sleep well, I need to hydrate myself, and I need to get physical exercise. And if I'm able to do that throughout the day, I'm filling up my bucket to then hopefully pour into others. And then having good relationships as well, making time for my family, my wife and my young son, and being able to separate what I do from work, from being able to separate who I am at work versus who I am at home, which are the same conversations that I'm having with my players. So it's really practicing what I preach and then being intentional and deliberate about it, being present with where my feet are, whether I'm here at the stadium or I'm at home.
Man, I just love these conversations. And, and I intentionally said when I started doing scheduling out people to be guests on the podcast, I very intentionally said, we're doing this at 30 minutes, because if we start hitting 45, 60 minutes, man, we're going to be on this thing for 2 hours, because we got to set a time and say, you know what, that's it. And we're almost there. So I wanted to give you a couple minutes to do some last words of, one thing that I found in doing this work is the more people I talk to, the more diverse variety of people, ages, demographics, expertise, performance domains, the more I find myself having the same conversations. Do you have a general go-to? And of course, we want to be responsive to the needs of the clients that we work with. But do you have a couple general go-to things that are your fundamentals that you find yourself talking to the people, to everybody about?
Yeah, for sure. I think kind of my foundation of my practice is self-awareness and attention. So your ability to be aware of what's going on and redirect your attention to where you want it to be. So a lot of kind of words of encouragement or the foundation of conversations that I have with players revolve around their ability to be present and engage in the present moment while focusing on the things that they can control. In elite sport, in business, as a parent, there's so many things that come at us that are outside of our control that we end up spending our time and energy on, and it takes us away from the present. We're worried about the past or the future because of things outside of our control. And a lot of the conversations revolve around our ability to notice that our mind has wandered, redirect the attention back to the present moment on things that we can control. And a good friend of mine, Justin Sua, he has kind of the bumper sticker of, when you try to control the things you can't, they end up controlling you. And the more that we're able to just dominate our little 3-foot world around us over and over and over again, and when our mind wanders, bring it back and dominate our 3-foot world, the happier we'll be, and the less we'll worry about things that are outside of our control.
That's good stuff. And I appreciate it, because, when we talk about performance happens everywhere, everyone performs. It's just a matter of what does your performance look like? This is stuff that's valuable for everyone. And, from young to old athletes to parents, coaches, and, being a new dad, you get this, like, you have to take care of yourself. You got to be good to yourself and good for yourself so that you can be good for other people. And all this stuff matters. And it's funny that you mentioned Justin. He's not somebody that I know, but he's actually on my list of people to contact. Great dude. when I was actually going through school and I was reaching out and networking with people, he's one of those guys where I'm like, hey man, do you have 20 minutes to jump on a phone call and chat? And we ended up on the phone for like an hour and 15 minutes. He just was so gracious with his time. So I'm hoping he's going to be one of those guys. So I'm glad you brought that up. And I think that's a good message also, is that, you know, I just went down to the sports psychology conference in Orlando and saw a whole bunch of people that I knew, met a whole bunch of new people. And just seeing people that I know, that I'm connected to, talk to each other, and we realize just how small this career field is. Sports psychology itself, even though it goes back to what this is like the 50s or something like that, the career field of mental performance coaching and sports psychology is still really young. And so there's a lot of opportunity for those of us that are in it and those of us that are up and coming to really make a difference in this career. And it's blowing up, and I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm excited to be connected to you, and I really appreciate your time. And speaking of time, I'm going to let you go, because I looking at your clock back there, it's 6:00 and we got to get home. But man, I really appreciate your time. Leaving more to talk about just means that we're leaving more opportunity to have you back on the show later.
For sure. I appreciate it, Neil. Always enjoy our conversations. And you're right. We could wrap on this for hours. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Amped Mental Performance Weekly Podcast, your source for optimal mental performance coaching. I have 2 tasks for you this week. First, choose one action from today's conversation to implement in your life. Second, share this podcast and community with someone who values their mental performance. I appreciate your direct message feedback and would appreciate your online review of the podcast. Your honest rating and review help me improve the show and helps others find our community. Visit Arizona Mental Performance Training on all the popular social media outlets and at ArizonaMPT.com.